Hello to my early joiners. Thanks for joining right on time. As we're waiting for folks to scatter in, can you let me know in the chat very quickly if you can see my screen and hear me? Awesome. Thank you so much. Wow. So many yeses, a million yeses. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Amazing. It is 11:05 and we've just hit over 200 participants, so I'm going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's New Features webinar, where we'll be showing you all of the new and exciting features that we've released this past month. My name is Adney, and I'm a customer experience advocate here at monday.com. And I would also like to introduce my colleagues, Katie and Emily, who will be supporting today's demo behind the scenes, answering a lot of your questions. So we appreciate you. Thanks, Katie and Emily. So you should be able to see my screen and hear me, but if that's not the case at any point, please let us know by writing in the chat box so we can get it resolved as quickly as possible. Additionally, if you have to step away at any point, that's totally fine. This session is going to be recorded for you to watch at your leisure whenever you'd like, and it's also going to be available on the Monday Academy from next week on, which I'll show you how to get there at the end of the webinar. So today's session, it's going to be made up of two parts. First, we're going to take a look at some of our new features in action, and then we'll move into a live Q&A to answer your questions. So throughout the demo, please be sure to add any questions you have on your mind in the dedicated Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, instead of the general chat. We're not going to be monitoring the chat section. So we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can, but there are a lot of us today, 240 and counting. So if we don't get to your specific question, please feel free to check out our user community at community.monday.com, as it's likely someone else has already asked your question there and had it answered. And finally, you will be emailed a recording of today's session within our CSAT survey, which will be sent to you in about 3 business days. So let's jump right in and take a look at today's agenda. We have some really exciting updates to cover today. Mainly, we have an overview of the Monday AI Assistant's formula builder, our new monday.com layout, some textual search changes within the board, the new option of the people column in work forms, our app of the month mandatory fields, and a whole lot more. So with all that being said, let's jump into my monday.com account to check out our new Monday layout. So as you could see, our new layout enables us to make the product level navigation a lot more spacious. And this is going to be helpful with small screens too, like when we're browsing on our mobile apps, for example. We moved the left pane, which was originally here, to the top bar, and that created a much more cleaner look, leading to a less crowded, less cluttered user experience. It also enables us to find what we need quickly and have space to add more functionality if we need to in the future. And also now we're able to present the Monday products with their full names and designated colors, whereas before it wasn't immediately clear on if you're using Work Management, Monday Dev, or Monday CRM, unless you were familiar with our logos. So that's a nice addition as well. In my opinion, it's definitely a better use of space and it's easier on the eyes. I'm a big fan of our new layout and I hope you are too. Okay, so moving on, I want to show you a new way that we can search within our boards. So you now have the ability to customize the columns by which you want to make your search. So if you click search here, and then this filter button, you can make your choices between item columns and sub-item columns for which your search will apply. If the board has more than 10 columns overall, which includes item and sub-item columns, then we're going to select all those items, all those columns by default. If it's less than 10, then we'll select by default the first 9 columns between the items and sub-items. Definitely a neat feature. It's always a good thing to get more granular if we need to. And this feature is soon going to be coming to dashboards as well in the future. So next up, we have the people column question in work forms. This has really been a highly requested feature, and we are so glad to finally roll it out to all of you. If you don't know, work forms are a way to bring in new data into your monday.com boards from outside of your account or from people within your account. Using a form ensures that when you're creating a new item on your board through a form submission, the columns on your monday.com board are populated via questions on your form. So all of that data comes in seamlessly. If you haven't used forms before, I definitely recommend checking them out because it is a really, really awesome feature in our platform. So until now, if there was a people column in your board, just like this one, and then if I made a form based off this board and these columns, then the people column would not appear in the form as it wasn't supported. But now we've included the people column in our form, and that enables form submitters to specify which member of our account is related to this submission. For example, the most straightforward use case I can think of is to answer who they are, like who is submitting the form, or who are some other stakeholders that the form submission relates to. But there are lots of other use cases for it, and we're going to go over one together. I do want to note that this people column question in forms, it's only relevant if the people submitting the form are within your monday.com account, which I will elaborate on later. So looking at my contacts board, let's build a brand new form and take a look at what it looks like with setup with this people column question. So I'm going to open a form view. And now you could see that my people column question isn't here, but when I edit the form, you'll notice that it leads you to this locked question. The reason here is that the people column question can be enabled if the form is restricted to account members only. So we can click restrict form access, and then we will be able to select users in our monday.com account directly in our form. So let's jump to an already made form to see what this feature would look like in an example use case. So here I have a PTO request form that I built for internal members of my team who want to submit some PTO. So I'm going to go to my form and let's see what it looks like when I open the form to submit a request. So you see here, I'll have to put in my first and last name, put in my email as well. Say what site I'm from, in this case, New York City, which days I'm requesting off. Let's request off for the 27th. And now this is where our people column question comes in handy. So I have a people column on my PTO request form board right here, and it connects to this form in a really nice way because I can select who my manager is. In this case, Asha is my manager. So now whenever I put in the request, so let's say I submit it right now, my request seamlessly comes into my board with all the information filled out via the columns I have. And what's nice is that Asha is automatically entered as my manager in our people column, which means that Asha is going to get notified immediately saying Adney submitted this PTO request in this form. It'll direct her to this board, to this particular item, which she can then approve my request, deny the request, or reach out to me for more details. So definitely a seamless way to streamline our workflow, improve accountability for completing forms. And what's even better is that this feature removes the need to use automations to assign an item to a relevant person, as that person or people, they're all going to be assigned upon entry. So some things to keep in mind here. As mentioned, this feature, it's only available if the form is restricted to account members only. So that means if the form is public to users outside of your account, then you'll still be able to add the question, but it will automatically be hidden without the ability to show it. So once you restrict the form like we did earlier with our contacts board, then the option to show the question will come up again, and this will allow you to enable that feature. And also restricting the form to account members only, that also means the form creator has full control over who has access to the form. which is really important as it assists with the security and confidentiality of sensitive data. And that's critical for this feature because it involves private data like profile pictures, roles, contact information. And for now, you can only select one member. So here, I can only select one member, which means this people column question, it is a single selection. It's not a multiple selection, but we will work on expanding the feature in the future to support multiple selections. And if there is a demand for it, we will develop and define a way to utilize the people column question in public forums in the future as well. So let us know, let us know about any feedback in our community page, which I'll link at the end of our webinar. Okay, so staying on this form, I would like to demonstrate our small but mighty new feature, which is right to left language support. So by clicking this button here, we're able to toggle the form and text direction. So this is especially for our users who struggle to use and share their forms due to lack of right to left language support, like our Hebrew and Arabic speaking users, for example. And this feature is supported for all question types, form formats, and our submissions viewer. This is not yet supported in the form response viewer app, but we are planning to improve that soon. Beautiful. So let's head back to our main table and let's introduce a new development to the Monday AI assistant, which is our formula builder. So we've actually found that our users struggled a lot with building the right formula for their use case, as over 91% of our formula support tickets were simple how-tos. So we wanted to address this gap right away, and the Formula Builder Assistant is exactly what we've all been looking for to build the right formula for our needs and quickly. So let's walk through a use case together and observe the power and swiftness of the new Formula Builder. So let's say we're managing a budget, and let's assume for a minute that there is a very critical budget meeting coming up, and we really need a winning formula to get us some statistics. So now we're in the closure of Q2. We're just opening up Q3. So we want to use the Monday AI assistant to build us a formula to calculate a few things. So I'm going to open this formula column here, which I renamed remaining budget. I'm going to go down to our AI assistant and you'll see this formula builder button. I'll click it and now I can input my prompt. In this case, I'm going to ask the formula builder to calculate the amount left by deducting the actual from the planned. Let's see what it comes up with. So you'll see here, it gives us a nice explanation on the formula and what it does. And I have this option to copy the formula, which I can then paste into my formula column seamlessly. And then I can set the formula and immediately I have the amount of budget that I've left. So we can see where we stand as we enter Q3 immediately. So next, I want to calculate the growth of how our expenses grew from Q1 to Q2. And that's also something our formula builder can give us a hand with. So I'm going to go to my second formula column, click our formula builder, and I'm going to ask it to calculate the growth from Q1 to Q2 in percentage. And here we go. I can copy and paste the formula, set it, and sometimes you may need to make some adjustments. Let's say I'm going to. Okay, so sometimes it won't match the column name. So I'm going to go into my columns. I'm going to write Q2. You can see it probably needed the brackets. Then Q1. And I'll put Q1 here as well. There we go. So immediately I have my answers in percentage, and I even can color code these results if I want to. So I can go to my 3 dots here, go to our conditional coloring. Let's say I want things to be marked as red for the entire row if our QOQ percentage is less than 0. So now I can see at a glance which areas I need to focus to improve going into Q3. when it comes to expenses. So as we explore more and more, it's really important to keep in mind that the Monday AI assistant and the formula builder specifically is still in beta. So from the nature of AI, there might be inaccurate information and it will not always be perfect, as we saw right here. It had the correct column names, but it didn't include those brackets. So we can make those small adjustments, but we're still scratching the surface with the Monday AI assistant. And the more we use it, the smarter it will become. So we really can't wait to see how it will continue to evolve over time and become a game changer for your team's efficiency and productivity. Really, really exciting stuff is just around the corner. And I'm glad that all of you have front row seats on this journey ahead with us. So I want to mention the formula builder, it's still in gradual release, but I will be sending out a form to sign up for the beta in the CSAT survey, which you'll receive in about 3 business days. Fantastic. So let's keep on going. And I want to talk about a super important addition that will help save a lot of headaches when it comes to user management and automation ownership. So I'm going to head to my administration settings here. Then I'm going to go to my user section so I can see all of the users in my monday.com account. And unfortunately, I'm sad to say that SpongeBob has decided to leave monday.com and part ways with us. So we'll need to deactivate his user. So I'm going to go to the 3 dots next to his name and click deactivate user. And this notice here is a new feature of ours. And what's great is that you'll see there's now this notice that informs you that deactivating SpongeBob will also deactivate all of his automations, giving us an option to seamlessly transfer the ownership of his automations to an active user in our team, in our case, Patrick Starr. The notice also reminds us that any integrations that SpongeBob made will need to be recreated from scratch, as integrations are personal to each user and they cannot be transferred to other users due to privacy and legal reasons. So this notice is regarding automations. It's super time-saving feature, as before, admins had to proactively remember to manually transfer automation ownership before deactivating a user. And you cannot transfer automation ownership of already deactivated users. So many times, admins would have to reactivate old users, transfer ownership, and then deactivate them again. It led to some headaches, overall confusion on what process to follow and when. So I really hope that this notice can save all of you some time when it comes to adjustments internally. Up next, let's head on over to our apps marketplace to go over our app of the month, which is mandatory fields. So our apps marketplace can be found right here by clicking the jigsaw puzzle piece in the top right corner of your account. For those of you who don't know, our apps marketplace is where you can find a range of apps which allow you to expand monday.com's capabilities, and they're all built by third-party developers. So from here, I'm going to look up mandatory fields. And then you can click the application page here. For you, it'll say add app, which you can click, and then you can choose to add it to all of the workspaces in your account, or in our case, a specific workspace and a specific board. So this app addresses a gap that a lot of you have passed over as feedback, which is restricting items from moving one phase of a project to another without certain conditions being met. I know that everyone builds project phases differently in Monday, but this app opens up many possibilities with how we can better monitor the flow of our work and project movement overall. Give me 1 second to take a sip of water. Okay, beautiful. So now that we've added this app, I'm going to go back to my board and I'm going to open a dashboard view. You could do this by clicking add view and then going down to more views and finding our dashboard view or a chart view. And in our case, we already have one right here. And I want to add a dashboard widget from our widget center. And this widget is connected to our mandatory fields app. So I'm going to look up mandatory fields, and our widget will populate here since we previously downloaded the app. And here is where we can set our restrictions and build those connections between groups. So I'm going to choose the board that I want to restrict. In our case, it's project ABC. Then I want to choose the group that the restriction will apply to. So I want to restrict the in review group. And now I have to choose the columns that I want to be present in order for the item to be successfully moved to the in review group. So let's say that I want there to be an owner assigned for the task. I want a status assigned, and I want there to be a timeline for the task. I need those three conditions to be met in order for anyone on my team to move their task to be reviewed. And then I can click create. From here, that restriction will be added to our existing right here. And now I can go to my integrations to build a recipe to build on that restriction that we just created. So I'll go to my integration center. I'll look up mandatory fields. And we want to use this first recipe here, which is when an item is moved to group, restrict the group by columns from the widget, which we just set up. So I'm going to choose the group in our case is in review, and I'll add it to our board. So I created the restrictions within the app and within the widget, specifically showing which columns need to be restricted. And then in the integrations, I also chose the group that needs to be restricted. So let's see how this works now. So let's open a new project. Let's say I'm going to open project monday.com. And we know that in order for project monday.com to move from planning to in review, there has to be an owner assigned. There has to be a status, and there needs to be a timeline set for the project. So I'm going to set an owner, in this case, myself. I'm going to set a status, maybe it's future steps, but I'm purposefully not going to set a timeline. So now when we move the item to our interview group, let's see what happens. You'll see it'll stay there for a second, but eventually it'll be moved right back to our planning group automatically. In addition to that, we'll get notified in our bell icon on which item returned to its previous group, and even better, what column it was missing. So now I'll be notified as the owner of this board. I can go to that item. I can notify maybe my teammate who didn't fill in that information. Maybe I can tag them and I can let them know to fill in that information, make that update here. In our case, let's set the timeline on our own. And once I do that, once I move that to in review, it'll successfully stay there since we met our conditions. So this is definitely a wonderful application. It aligns with the gap that our users have been wanting, which is, I really have personally heard from plenty of users who are keen for mandatory fields and mandatory columns. So I'm glad that this app can make it possible. We can get started with that. And if you have any questions regarding this app, or if you need help troubleshooting issues that have come up when you're exploring its capabilities, go on to the apps marketplace to the mandatory fields page, and you can contact their developer, ESL Software Systems, directly, as they're the ones who developed this, so they'll be happy to help you out with any issues. Amazing. So let's head back over to our main table, and I want to review some new additions to our dependency column. So we recently added some major changes to our dependency, so we thought it would be beneficial to do a review of what we added and how to navigate those changes. So for those who are not familiar with dependencies, they help create vital connections between dependent items to better manage projects in a more efficient way. And project managers in particular, they love to use dependencies to ensure that a project stays on track and connected deadlines stay in sync. So if a timeline of one item gets pushed, any timelines of impacted projects, they also get pushed seamlessly, for example. So opening up our dependency settings here, we see that we have 3 modes to choose from: flexible, strict, and no action. So flexible mode ensures that no overlaps between the dates of the items that are dependent on one another can occur. That means if you change an item's date and there is no overlap between the dates of those dependent items, there's no change that's going to be made. But if you change an item's date and there is an overlap between the date of its dependent item, the date will also adjust, so there won't be an overlap any longer. Strict mode adjusts an item's date to reflect the exact time changes made based on the item that it is dependent on. So that means when you're changing the date of an item, the date of its dependent item will adjust in the exact same way. For example, if 10 days were added to one timeline, there will be 10 days added to the timeline of its dependent item, regardless of any overlap or anything like that. And the no action mode shows that it's just a visual representation of a dependent relationship, but there won't be any action made if you shift things according to any dependent relations. It's only going to visually display that there's some kind of dependent relationship. So an overview: flexible ensures no overlaps, strict mimics exact changes from one timeline to another, and no action visually shows a dependent relationship without any action being taken. So let's start in strict mode for our walkthrough. So in addition to these three dependency modes, we also have dependency types, which are, if you could see here, finish to start, start to start, finish to finish, and start to finish. So let's walk through each one. So finish to start means that task A must finish before task B can begin. This is the most commonly used type. Many projects follow flows where certain tasks require the completion of dependent tasks in order to get started. So I'm happy we've had this type added. Our second type would be start to start, which means that task B cannot begin before task A begins. This is great for project phases which need to happen in conjunction with each other. Like social media planners cannot start editing their posts before members start drafting the posts, but you can definitely start editing as the drafts begin to come in. So that's start to start. A third type would be finish to finish, which means that task B cannot finish until task A is finished. For example, task B could be to schedule a meeting with a client to present a demo with our sales engineers, whereas task A might be a meeting with the sales engineering team to discuss the client's needs, pain points, and some overall goals. And then our last type is start to finish, which means that task B cannot finish until task A has started. For example, if we are managing live shifts on a support queue, member B cannot finish their shift until member A starts their shift to take over. So we always have coverage. Awesome. So with our strict mode as well, we have another layer called lead versus lag. So you can use lead versus lag to identify necessary delays or opportunities to save time in your project plan. So two key terms to remember as we move forward here are predecessor and successor. So the predecessor would be the task that is blocking other tasks from starting or finishing, like task 1 here. And then we have the successor that is waiting on other tasks to start or finish, which would be like task 2 here. So what is a lag? Lag would be the delay between the predecessor and successor, as in the time that must pass before the successor can begin. For example, if task 1 is submitting a brand design draft, then there must be 2 days after it is submitted to go over edits, feedback, and some ideas on finalizations before task 2, which is submitting it to leadership for approval. So now what is a lead in this case? A lead is an acceleration of a successor. That is the time by which a successor can begin in parallel with the predecessor. For example, a 3-day overlap between starting to develop a feature, which might be task 1, and testing the feature, which might be task 2. So we can see in my board here, we have a couple of tasks to work with, namely task 1, which ends on May 9th, and then task 2, which starts on May 10th. You can also see that we've chosen the finish to start type, which means that task 1 must finish in order for task 2 to start. So our dates, May 9th and May 10th, they check out nicely. But let's say that we want to add a lag of 2 days to give everyone some breathing time between each task. I can open my dependency for task 1, and I can enter in 2 to resemble a 2-day lag. And as you can see seamlessly, all of my dates for the entire project delay accordingly to the lag that I chose. And so now let's imagine I want the opposite of this. And I want task 1 and task 2 to be worked on in parallel with each other, with maybe a 3-day overlap at the end and start of their timelines. I can open our dependency for task 1. I can go to the lag and I can enter a lead of -3, which will adjust our timelines for those 2 tasks specifically to give us that one-time 3-day overlap. And it's still going to push everything else to keep everything on track until execution. And there you have it. That is a quick overview of the new additions to our dependencies. And I appreciate all of your patience going through all the information we've covered so far. I do want to note that this new dependency type and all these lags and leads, they're open as a trial feature, but in the future, it may require payment. Okay. So this completes the new features presentation part of our session. We're going to be moving into the Q&A shortly. So if you haven't had a chance, please be sure to add your questions in the Q&A box. And I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break and then we'll get. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Q&A. And we're going to get started with some questions. I do see we have a couple coming in. And I have a question from Aaron and Frank, which is a really great question I didn't think about. And they're asking, what happens if the move with the mandatory fields app is triggered by an automation? For example, let's say the move is triggered by a specific status being applied. Can mandatory fields throw it back if not all the fields are applied? Frank asked the same question. Amazing question. And I'm not exactly sure. So let's walk through it together and let's see what happens. So I have my project dashboard here. Okay, we have our mandatory fields app set up. And we have the same conditions, owner, status, and timeline. So let's create a new automation that when status changes to something, let's move the item to in review. Let's say when status changes to future steps. And I'm also going to change my restrictions to not include the status, since we're using that in the automation. So instead, I'll do planned effort. Awesome. So now we have owner, timeline, and planned effort as our restrictions. So I'll create a new test and I'll name this after you, Aaron. Say Project Aaron. Okay, so we'll assign an owner, assign a timeline, and effort spent, I'm going to leave it blank so we can see if the app will send Project Aaron back to planning. So that triggered our automation, which should move Project Aaron to interview. So let's see what happens. Okay, so far nothing. I'm going to do a quick refresh just to make sure. Okay, so it seems like that's our answer. If we do trigger an item movement via automation, that is a gap with this application. So we won't be able to move the item back to the original group. So that's a great point to bring up to their developer team and give them feedback, because ESL software systems, it's a small team and they take user feedback really seriously. So if you contact their developer here, or you go on their website, let them know, hey, this is a weakness of the feature that we've noticed. I'm sure that they would make that adjustment pretty quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and try to test it manually again, just to make sure that it's still working manually. There you go. So it worked pretty quickly that time. So our answer is confident that it doesn't work with automations. So awesome flag, Aaron, Frank, really appreciate that. So let's go through some more questions. Trying to find some questions that are less specific that most of us can benefit from. Okay, I have a question from an anonymous attendee. For the people question in work forms, will the user be able to select from all of the people in the account, all of the people that are subscribed to the board, or all of the people that are members of that workspace? That's a great question. So let's say I'm going to go to my form here. And let's test this as well. It's my impression that we're able to select members who are in our workspace who also have access to the form. So if there are members of your account who are a part of your workspace, but they don't have access to your form, then it's my impression that you won't be able to select them in the options here. But let's go ahead and test that. So right now, I have these two members here that we can try. So they're part of my workspace, but let's make this form a private board. And let's only invite one of them. So now it's private. Now only Asha is invited and MJ is not invited to this board. So I'm going to do a refresh, and then let's see if we can select MJ in the form. So it looks like we still can select MJ, even though she's not invited to our board, but she's still in our workspace. And this is not involving everyone in the monday.com account, as this is a fairly large account that I'm currently on. So the answer to your question would be all the members who are a part of your workspace. Great question. Okay, looking through some more questions here. I have a question from Rosalie saying, for the mandatory fields app, do we have to pay for that? That's a great question. They do have a free plan, which is what I'm currently on. And let's see. I believe that they have some paid options, but they have a free plan, which gives you pretty much everything you need. So I can go to their pricing. Yeah, so they have free plan, free forever, but you can upgrade the plan so that gives you some unlimited options with the amount of restrictions you want to set per month, columns and boards. For now, there's up to 10 restrictions a month, 3 columns, 1 board. That's the free plan. and then $50 a month if you'd like to have that unlimited option, or you can pay yearly and save 27%. Great question, Rosalie. Thanks for that. Looking through some more questions. Okay, let's go over some how-to questions from folks. So I have a question from an anonymous attendee. This was not covered today, but can you embed a board, like a table, in a document? You definitely can. So I'm going to go ahead and add an example document. And you don't have a name, so I'm going to name it Anon Doc, because I want to name this after you. All right, so after I add this doc, I can put in some information whenever I'd like, and I always have the option to press this plus sign here to add some content. And if you scroll down to board or widget, specifically board, you can choose from your boards in this workspace, for example, and it'll embed in the document directly. So in this case, I chose Project ABC, and I can expand the view. And now I can look at my board directly in my document, and I can interact with the board. I can make edits in real time seamlessly from my work doc. So pretty cool feature. And it was a good question. So I feel like it was helpful to go over. Thanks for that. Okay, let's see. More questions. Okay, I have another question from an anonymous attendee. Can an automation get set up in the form when someone submits a form? Can they receive a confirmation email? Note, the person submitting the form does not have a Monday account. They're external. They just have access to the form. That's another awesome question. So I'm going to go to my PTO request form here. And let's say this email column here, this is what we'll use to automate this email being sent out. So the answer to your question is yes, you definitely can send a confirmation email to folks, but if they're external to your account, it would require them to enter their email in the form. And you know that there's some user error there that could mess things up, because if they have a typo in their email, of course, the email won't send correctly. And if they forget to input their email, then there will be no confirmation email. So there's some points there to keep in mind. But let's say, so I already have a question that says, what's your email? So now I can go into my automations and I can create a custom automation. And my trigger here can be when an item is created, which also means whenever a form is submitted, then I want to send an email. So you can send an email through either Gmail or Outlook. In this case, I'll use Gmail. You can click the icon to select your account. So I'm going to do this on my personal account since I already have my Gmail set up. Now let me just quickly add an email section here. Okay. Go back to my automations. Okay, when item is created, then send an email. So I can click the Gmail icon to connect our Gmail account, and then I can click email to then customize the subject and body of the email to be custom to their form submission, and general to be that general confirmation regards that you'd like to send out. So I can say, hello, thanks for submitting. So I can say, hi, maybe the item name is referring to the person referring the form. In my case, it'll be the first question of the form will be, what is your name? So that'll be inputted there. Hi, thank you for submitting this form, confirming that we have received it. And if you want to, in this example form, I don't have any questions laid out, but all those questions will be connected to columns on your board. And each of these variables here are connected to data in your board, more specifically columns in your board, like status and email. So if you have question 1, question 2 that are different statuses, multi-selections, long text, whatever it may be, you can click those options here if you want to give the external user a review of what they submitted to us, just to make sure that all of their information was submitted correctly. Okay, and then I'll click to someone. In this case, we'll choose our email column. So it gets sent to the email that they inputted in the form submission, and I'll create it. So now let's go back to my form. And submit quick message. And you'll see that there's an email that just got logged here. I'm not going to open my email because it's a terrible mess, but you can see here the record of the email that was sent and the time and the details here. So it'd say, hi, incoming form answer since I didn't input a name. Thank you for submitting this form. Question 1, question 2. So great question. You definitely can send confirmation emails, and you can get creative with them as well and automate them in different ways. Okay, let's look through some more questions here. Oh, follow-up question to what we just set up from Deborah. Who would this email come from? So the email would come from whichever email you selected in the integration. So in our case, it's going to come from my email here, but you can also choose to set up multiple accounts and do so from there. So it'll be received from whichever email you personally set up there. Looking through some more questions. See if we can answer one more. Quick question from January, mandatory app question. Sounds like this is only for within a board and not moving to another board, correct? Yes, January. Awesome name, by the way. That is correct. So it is only restricting item movement between groups on a singular board. And it doesn't yet involve board movement, but that could be feedback that you pass on over to their developers, because that seems like a pretty commonsensical next development they could add. That would be pretty awesome. Okay, let's see if we can do any more quick questions like that. Okay, so let's take this last couple minutes to give us some breathing time and go over some resources that I want to make sure all of you have access to and are reminded of. So our community page actually has incorporated a new section that is dedicated to new features. So if you ever have any questions following a new features webinar, if you're a regular attendee, or if you have questions beforehand, afterwards, whatever it may be, you can go into our community page and you can now access this new feature section, which I've linked in the chat section, and you can put in your questions, see announcements, get access to some resources and all that good stuff. Also want to remind everyone that we do have a Monday community on Facebook as well, which I'm linking right here. So if you want to join that community, we have thousands of users there, always collaborating, asking questions, supporting each other. Feel free to join there as well. And lastly, I want to mention our Monday Academy, which also has incorporated a new feature section. And this is quite nice because it gives you an archive of all of the new features which we've covered. So you can watch the videos, any of the old ones from previous months, and you can have this readily available for you whenever you'd like. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me during this time. We super appreciate your patience and your participation. It's been an awesome experience, and we'll see you next month. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful week and a great weekend ahead.